This is Steven Diego, and you are tuned in to Breaking Down the Breakdown. On today's episode, we are going to talk more about anxious attachment styles and its detriments to ourselves, but also how can we actually deal with it. Hello, everybody. Welcome in to Breaking Down the Breakdown. It's me, Steven Diego. I want to say hi, hello, how are you? Thank you. I want to say thank you, first of all, because I just received news that we are charting in Taiwan. So hello to all my friends in Taiwan. I didn't even know I had friends in Taiwan. This is the craziest thing ever, but we are on the iTunes chart in Taiwan. I mean, shoot, maybe we'll only last for like a few days, but I don't care. You know what that says? That says that we are actually reaching each other now. That we are finally starting to speak volumes. Also, I'm going to sound like I have a lisp. I mean, I do have a lisp, but I'm going to sound like it's more pronounced because I am wearing my retainers. I realize now how much of a difference it makes, and I kind of don't want to take off my retainers now because I'm recording this right now. I'm on camera. This is going to look so weird. I look like I'm preparing to, anyways. I'm kidding. Anyways, hi. Welcome in to Breaking Down the Breakdown. I do want to say yes. Thank you so much for listening to me. It's a big thing for me. Like, sure, like, a lot of people are like, you're not even in the top 100. I'm like, I debuted in top 104. That's enough for me. Because for me, that means that our words, our guests, all of their experiences, they're actually being heard. And that is the most important thing about this podcast. I know I'm a small dude, I thought only my friends listened to me. So I think it's fantastic. I'm really ecstatic because this is what we set out to do. I love how I keep saying we, but you're probably like, there's nobody else here. It's a lie. I would not be doing this without any of you. It's the truth. If it wasn't for all of you reminding me how important it is to be open about our mental health, about the things that we go through, this wouldn't have happened. So thank you very much. But without further ado, I know you're probably wondering what we're talking about today. If it's not obvious in the title of this episode of the podcast, we are going to expand and we are going to explore a lot more in terms of what the fuck happens when somebody has anxious attachment styles. Last episode was rough. Talking about it and listening to it again was rough because it felt like I was chastising people who are like me. But then I listened to it again, being mindful of what I was saying, being mindful that what I was saying was just sharing information. And I started to realize something. That was my anxious attachment style bleeding into my personality. Because remember, folks, these attachment styles are for relationships. And whenever we hear the word relationship, whenever we think of relationships, right, we automatically think romantic, right? It doesn't have to be just romantic relationships, right? Relationships could be a relationship with your parents, could be a relationship with your friends, right? Family members. This bleeds into that. Because for a lot of us, this is something that we grew up with, and we didn't know that this was not a thing. See, like, I'm avoiding certain words because I don't want to make it seem like it's a really bad thing. It really depends on how bad your anxious attachment can get. Personally, and I can only really speak for myself, personally, mine is really bad. And my past few relationships, my past few friendships, I've had to learn how to navigate through that. And in each time that I learned something, it was, it came with a price. And that price is losing people that I truly care about. And I don't mean losing them for good. They're still around me. They're still in my life. There's still so much love between us. But when I say losing someone, it's one of those things where you realize you may have taken for granted the time that you had together. And And as much as you want to blame that on outside factors, you have to own up to it and realize that that was your fault. That was your own doing. And that's something that I had to learn. That's something that I had to own up to. Because I had so much time with these amazing people. And every single time I was around them, instead of being present, I was stuck in my head, worried about yesterday and worried about what's going to happen tomorrow. I wasn't able to converse. And this is a true story, right? Like, this still happens to me right now with my friendships, right? Like, when there is an issue that is brewing in my head, it doesn't even have to be about them, about the people I'm with, right? I'm just so stuck in my head. And it renders me really like speechless some days. Some days I can't even pay attention to what people are talking about or saying to me because I'm so stuck in my head. And my responses are very, like generalized. Like I have NPC energy anytime it acts up, right? And this is just, one of the many examples of how anxious attachment can actually bleed into your everyday life. But we're going to dial it back because I do want to talk about anxious attachments in relationships. Because last episode, we touched up on it, and I spoke about certain things, certain experiences, but I never got to talk about how I dealt with it. I never got to talk about, how I was able to move forward and live my life knowing that this is what I have, this is the kind of attachment I have, and what steps am I taking in order to transform this into a more secure attachment style. And I can tell you right now with confidence, great confidence, guys, I'm nowhere near that stage. I'm really fucking not. Like, I would have days where I would still cry out of nowhere. But, we're going to get right into it because I know now that I'm cutting my podcast to 30 minutes, I can't just ramble on and on and on. I know how tiring it can get sometimes, but sometimes with guests is really fun. But I wanted to talk about, because we talked about the origins last time. And for those of you, here's a primer. For those of you who missed last episode, you can always click back on it. But all kidding aside, we talked about how this stemmed from my abandonment. Like it's the feeling of being abandoned by your parents, right? That for me is where it came from. Sorry. So anytime I attach myself to individuals, right, I always have this fear that they're going to leave. And, this was actually prevalent in high school. If you meet anybody in high school who knew me, I would always ask for hugs. I would always, just try to talk to everybody. I would always be sad. That was the main thing about me. I was sad. I don't know why. But I always thought that if I was sad, if I was depressed, if something was wrong with me, that people would give me the attention that I crave. And that kind of attention, I never realized. It wasn't because, when you're in high school, it's very hard to tell certain things apart, right? Especially if you have cognitive distortions or unchecked mental health disorders, right? Which I did. I didn't know I had OCD until a few years ago. And that played a huge part in how my high school life unfolded, right? This is why not a lot of people from high school care to talk to me or care to get to know me or, even think about me. And that's fine. That's fair because of what I've put them through. Because just imagine coming to school every day, you're already dealing with your own shit, and here comes some guy that's all like, hey guys, I'm so sad. Every fucking day. That was my life. And, being able to talk about that is very rough for me because people remember me differently. And that's how life is, right? Like, people get different versions of you. But in high school, it was very hard because, again, I'm just moved from a different country, right? My parents are not around. My mom always had to work. It was just a culmination of all of my traumas, and I didn't know how to deal with it. So high school was very rough, not just for me, but for everybody else around me. right? It's because I had this constant fear that all my friends are going to leave. I'm never going to be able to make friends. I don't have friends. And this is what I mean when I talk about your anxious attachment styles kind of like manifesting itself into other things. Because I definitely had a few friends in high school who truly cared about me and truly wanted to help. But because there were people that I was a little bit more attached to, that I started to feel like they were, making new groups of friends and were fading away, I started obsessing over how I am unworthy and I was just not a good person and that everybody leaves, woe is me. And, it was just not good, right? You end up either lashing out at others or lashing out at yourself. And I did both. I hate that I'm laughing about it, but what can you do, right? This was my past, right? And I really wish at that time that I knew what was going on. But this is why it's very important to be able to talk about your emotions with a professional, first of all, just so you can actually be diagnosed, right? And remember, guys, the very first consultation, sometimes the very first therapist that you see might not have all the answers. It will take time. It takes a lot of time and patience. But if you guys are looking into seeing a therapist, I say go for it. There's literally nothing that could go wrong. You will get vibes from people sometimes if they're like, okay, no, I do not like this therapist. That's none. Like, no offense taken on their part. Like, trust me on that, because this is your life, right? You need to be able to converse with somebody that you are comfortable with. But going back to the anxious attachment, so like that was high school, and you fast forward it to when you're a little bit older, when I was a little bit older, and I started forming more friendships and forging more relationships, and it's a cycle that never ends. Instead of now being sad, I do things to keep people in my life. Like I try to like be the center of attention because I felt like, a perfect example would be drinking. This is where I would say my alcoholism actually really developed. And I'm not proud of it, right? But it was the only time where I felt like if I was drinking and I was drunk, people like me. Because people think I'm funny when I'm drunk. So I would drink excessively just so I can feel like I'm the life of the party and that I have friends. And, sometimes it actually translates into people being attracted to me. In my later years, I talk like I'm super old. I'm kind of old, but not that old. But, like it was so much easier with alcohol to meet people, first of all. Second of all, it was so much easier to get along with people when you're all drinking. And third of all, when you are in the middle of, your little party phase and you're, oh my God, everything is so much fun, confidence was easier to attain. Because that is one of the many things that I lacked, right? And that is actually something that a lot of people with anxious attachment styles have in common. And we are very insecure for certain reasons, right? I mean, one of the biggest reasons was my abandonment, right? As a child, if you've been left behind, that creates this really, really big hole within you that you can't fill, because you will feel like you're never good enough because people will always leave. So many people become, I don't want to say worse version of themselves, but they start to embody their intrusive thoughts, which is a big no-no. And that's something that I actually did, right? Like, I would watch movies. Like, one of the perfect examples was Cruel Intentions. If any of you have seen that movie, Cruel Intentions, right? It's about manipulating. It's about you have to be so cool. You have to be able to do this and do that. And it was one of those things where it's like, wow, like, look at how much power these people have. They can manipulate people. Like, that's not a good thing if you look at it. It's very hurtful. But for people with anxious attachment styles, it's this kind of area that sometimes a lot of us turn to to distract ourselves from the reality that we feel like everyone is just going to leave anyway, or we feel that our partners will never ever love us the way that we love them. It's a really fucked up situation. And for a lot of people, people always Google, like, how do I stop this? How do I get better? How do I do this? Well, first of all, if you're already at the point where you're actually Googling it, congratulations, because you're well aware that you have anxious attachment styles. And for a lot of us, that is something that we don't know. People just label us as crazy, and we leave it at that. And we actually carry that into our future relationships. Whenever we meet people, we say, oh, I'm a little bit crazy. And we make fun of it. We think it's funny. Ha ha, he he, until everything happens again, right? It is not a good look. But aesthetics aside, it is not good for us or people that we love mentally and emotionally. People get hurt because of our insecurities. And this is where we really need to take a step back and ask ourselves, why do I feel this way whenever I'm getting close to people? Because this isn't just about romantic relationships anymore. If at the moment that is how you feel with your relationships, please take a step back and ask yourself, why is this a cycle for me? Why is it that the last time I talked to my boyfriend or my girlfriend was an hour ago, and they said that they were going to take a nap, and I feel like they're actually not taking a nap. They're just using it as an excuse to talk to other people so that I don't bother them. Why do our brains go through that thought process? I want you all to challenge your way of thinking, right? Challenge yourself whenever your thinking goes there. Instead of obsessing over what they might be doing or what they are not doing for you, right? Ask yourself, what are you not doing for yourself? And what the fuck are you doing? Why are you sitting there catastrophizing? Why are you sitting there thinking of the worst case scenarios that could happen in your relationship in the future? And then you start going to check their Instagram profiles or whatever the fuck social medias they have to see if they've liked somebody else's photo in the time that you're thinking about them that they're not talking to you. Are you going to sit there and see if their follower count or following count went up? And who exactly did they follow? Feel a little attacked? Don't worry, because that's exactly how I feel as well. And that's actually how my brain operates. And it's not healthy. Because what are you looking for? The moment that these follower counts go up and you don't know who they followed or who followed them, what are you going to do about it? Is it really going to help your relationship? If you have these questions, if you feel like you have to do this in order to keep your relationship in check, sweetie, I got a big storm coming, because I tell you right now, this isn't a them problem anymore. I think one of the worst things about being a person with anxious attachment styles is that we feel paralyzed most of the time. And I say paralyzed because we feel like the smallest of movements, the smallest of change within our inner circle, within our friendships, within our routines will derail whatever relationship we have with our significant others. And by that I mean sometimes you get invited to go out to lunch with a few friends. And instead of just going to lunch, you feel guilty for going to lunch without your partner. So you end up writing a 2-page essay on who you're going out to lunch with, where you're going out to lunch with, how long you've known these people for, what you're going to do afterwards, and then asking them what they're doing for lunch. And I can tell you right now, I bet you $15. This is like my favorite line now. I bet you this many dollars. I bet you $15. If your partner responds with, oh, cool, all right, I'm going to go grab lunch with a few friends then. Did your heartbeat just, start going insane? Did your heart just drop to your stomach? Or were you a little bit more cool about it and you're like, oh yeah, awesome, we have, friend stuff. Which friends? And then what happens if they say, oh no, just a few friends, you don't know them? Are your gears grinding yet? Are you triggered yet? You see, this is one of the biggest issues that we have as people with anxious attachment styles. Because instead of being able to understand that it doesn't matter who our significant others go out with when we're not with them, we make it into a big deal that they're not telling us who they're with. Because for us, we immediately go into defense mode and say, well, why are they hiding who they are? It's easy to just tell me who they are. Why are they being kept hidden? But ask yourself, why do you need to know every single detail? And you sit there and you tell them that you trust them. Because you're afraid that if you say you can't really trust them, they're going to pull the plug on the relationship. Why? Why are we putting ourselves through this kind of energy, through this kind of situation? See, this is the kind of thinking I want you guys to start adapting when I tell you guys to challenge yourselves the next time that you start to feel a little uneasy about your partners. Is there actually a reason to feel uneasy? Or is this being brought on by my own cognitive distortions, by my own intrusive thoughts? Am I the one that's creating all of these scenarios that doesn't fucking exist? And I'm scared I'm going to manifest it into reality. It's rough. I'm not going to lie, right? And sit here and say, I figured it all out. This is why my relationships are so secure now. No, they're not, right? This is one of the many reasons as to why I struggle in relationships. I always end up placing my worth on how my partners react or how my partners treat me. And it's not like they treat me badly. I think that is the wildest part of the whole thing. It's not like any of my partners in the past have ever treated me terribly. But again, with what I said last time, it's about setting up these unreasonable expectations, secret expectations. And you know why that is? Is because when we get into relationships, we actually place our partners on a pedestal. And I spoke about this last time. But we give them way too much power. And I don't even want to say power. I don't want to say we give them too much power. But how do I say this? I know you guys know what I'm saying, what I'm trying to say here, but it's as if any decision we have to make will be based on how they feel. It's as if that we have to look to them to see if what we're doing is right or wrong. It's as if we were never good enough until they found us and told us that we were. And for someone with anxious attachment styles, that is a no-no. A lot of us might never be able to shed this kind of attachment style. And that's okay. But what's important then is to be aware of it at all times. Is to have your partner be aware of it. Is to communicate. To practice. I see flare-ups from anxious attachment styles. Like we get these, the flare-ups, when I talk about flare-ups, like those, oh my goodness, what could they be doing? Because they did not respond to me for 30 minutes. I see it kind of like a panic attack, right? And in doing so, you can treat it like one, in a sense that you can learn to diffuse that sort of mentality and that sort of emotion in the same way that you would do with a panic attack. Taking deep breaths. Like the square breathing, right? Just picture a square, and as you're inhaling, you draw a line. You exhale, you draw another line. Inhale, you draw a line until you have, been fully building a square with your breathing, right? That actually really does help. Being able to ground yourself, telling yourself that you're here, looking at your surroundings, right? The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1s. 5 things you can see. 4 things you can... Is it here? I forgot, but 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But you can totally do these things, because what it does is that it grounds you. It brings you back down to earth, because, we're in outer space thinking this way right now. And it will allow us to assess the situation. It will allow us to really see what's real and what's not real. Is it true? Are you psychic? A lot of people will try to say, yes, my intuitions are so good, but they don't realize that half the time they are gaslighting themselves. And that's because, they've been gaslit before by other people. So they are so good at it because they've experienced it time and time again, right? And again, that's part of other people's traumas as well. This is why it's very, very challenging to have this kind of attachment style. But what's important is to get to the root of it and to practice things that allows you to look at the bigger picture, that allows you to see that what you're going through at that moment might not actually be real. And yes, it is an overreaction of sorts. But the moment that you catch it, it's something that you can laugh at with yourself. Or it's something that you can be relieved by and say, you know what, I have wasted 6 minutes of my time thinking about these things when I can actually be doing something more productive for myself. See, it's almost time again. My goodness, I feel like 30 minutes is never enough when talking about these things. Next time I am going to do my best to bring somebody to talk about this, because I know that you guys have already heard my side of the story and what I go through. I can tell you right now, everything I described to y'all just now, these were all me. This is what I had put my relationships through. And it's not easy talking about them. I apologize to all of my exes who are listening to this right now and might be triggered by this. I do, but it's very important for me to share this part of me with you guys, because this is exactly why I'm doing a podcast on mental health. To remind all of us that it's a very real thing, but it's also manageable. And we can still thrive despite all this. I really hope today's episode kind of opened up a lot of people's eyes and ears and mouths and emotions and hearts towards this, I don't want to say issue, but towards anxious attachment styles. If you recognize that a friend, if not for you, that a friend or a partner exhibits these kinds of behavior, have a conversation about them with it. Learn about attachment styles with them. I think that is the next step in our journey with mental health, through mental health, It's being able to help each other out in a way that's never been done before. Instead of throwing books at your friends, throwing, random reels about, oh, look at this. This is you. Or, ha ha ha. Why don't we learn together? But this has been Breaking Down the Breakdown. Thank you so much for being here again. Remember, guys, email me at breakingdownthebreakdown@outlook.com if you guys want to be part of the conversation. And remember, be kind, be compassionate, be super awesome, because you never know what anybody out there is going through. And please try not to judge people before you even get to know them, because again, you never know what they're going through. But thank you so much for being here. I'll see you later.